Speed is my motto, nothing's ever holding back.
Hello everyone and welcome back to the Lone Road iRacing podcast. My name is Guy Robertson, and whether you're listening on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or one of the many other platforms around the world where this little show somehow continues to find new listeners, I just want to thank you for joining me on this week's episode. This week we have a packed show. We're going to be diving into the latest iRacing development update for May 2026 and discussing what some of those changes might mean not just for Season 3 but potentially for the future direction of the entire service. Then later in the show we're going to tackle a topic that has already sparked plenty of discussion on social media. What continent has the best racetracks? Europe, North America, Oceania, Asia, South America or Africa? Before we finish, we'll open the iRacing Agony Uncle mailbag once again and help a listener who is struggling with a question that almost every iRacer faces at some point. How much content should you actually buy? But first, let's talk about the development update. Don't go away. One thing I've always enjoyed about iRacing development blogs is that they allow us to look beyond next week's schedule. Most of the time we're focused on immediate things like the next race, the next track, the next safety rating gain, the next iRating loss. The next idiot who decides turn 1 is actually optional. We're very much focused on the present. Development updates force us to look further ahead. They show us where the service is going, and this particular update feels slightly different. Not because there are huge revolutionary changes, not because we're suddenly getting a new graphics engine tomorrow, not because AI race stewards are taking over next week, but because many of the individual changes seem connected. There's a common thread running through them. When you look at Dirt AI, the new Formula Vee, the new BMW M2, the continued UI improvements, the improvements to onboarding, you start seeing a pattern. To me, this update feels heavily focused on making iRacing more accessible, making it easier to learn, making it easier to enter new disciplines, making it easier for new members to stay engaged, and that really matters. Because all of us experienced racers sitting here with thousands of races under our belts, we sometimes forget when joining iRacing what joining iRacing actually feels like. Think back to your first week. You probably had no idea what you were doing. I'm definitely one of those. I was definitely overwhelmed by the content, and overwhelmed by series, overwhelmed by terminology, confused by the licenses, confused by safety rating, confused by iRating, and the learning curve was enormous. Anything iRacing can do to reduce the barrier helps everybody, because healthy rookie participation actually becomes healthy participation throughout the entire service. Dirt AI arrives. Let's start with arguably one of the biggest announcements, Dirt AI. If you've never spent much time in dirt oval racing, you might wonder why this is such a big deal. The answer is simple. Dirt racing isn't simple, it's pretty hard. Really hard in a matter of fact. Road racing drivers often think they can jump into dirt and immediately be competitive. Most discover very quickly that they can't. Everything feels different. The car moves differently, the grip changes constantly, and the racing line evolves. The track actually, it's like it's alive. The braking points evolve also. You are essentially learning a completely different skill set, and that's quite intimidating. I've spoken to numerous listeners over the years who have said almost exactly the same thing. I love to try dirt oval, but I don't know where to start. And that's a key issue. People aren't necessarily avoiding dirt because they dislike it. Many are avoiding it because they don't feel comfortable learning it publicly. Nobody enjoys entering a race and spinning every 3 laps. Nobody enjoys finishing 2 laps down, and nobody enjoys becoming the rolling chicane. AI changes that. AI gives people permission to fail, and that's incredibly powerful, because failure is how we learn. When nobody is watching, we're much more willing to experiment. We're more willing to try different lines. We're more willing to make mistakes and more willing to push the limits. And those mistakes become lessons. What AI potentially does is create thousands of future dirt racers who otherwise may never have entered an official race, and that could have a huge impact on participation. Now, I know some people will say AI isn't real racing, and they're right. It's not. Nothing replaces racing against real people. Nothing replaces reading another driver's body language through the car. Nothing replaces setting up an overtake against a human opponent. And nothing can replace race pressure. But AI doesn't need to replace multiplayer. It simply needs to prepare drivers for multiplayer. And that's where its real value lies. Think about how many people currently use AI to learn road circuits. Think about how many people use AI before joining a new series. Think about how many people use AI to test race pace. Dirt racers now gain access to those same tools, and generally think that's going to help participation over the long term. The bigger question. Here's a question that immediately came into my mind when reading this update. If the AI has finally arrived, what comes next? Because AI itself has evolved dramatically over the last few years. We're already seeing adaptive AI, we're already seeing smarter AI behaviour, and we're already seeing more realistic racecraft. So where does this actually lead? Could we eventually see AI coaching? Imagine finishing a race and receiving feedback. You constantly broke too early into turn 3. You lose 2/10 every lap at turn 7. You tend to overdrive corner entry when under pressure. That's the sort of thing many real-world drivers receive from their coaches. Could AI one day provide that similar guidance? Perhaps, maybe it could. And when you start looking at the broader technology trends, it doesn't mean impossible anymore. Which is why dirt AI may actually be more important than it first appears. It's not just about dirt racing, it's another step toward making iRacing a better learning platform. And that's something that benefits every single one of us. Right, we'll be right back, and we're going to talk about new Formula Vee. One section of the development update that immediately caught my attention was the announcement of the new Formula Vee. Now, before anybody starts panicking, let's clear something up immediately. The Formula Vee, the original one, is staying. It's not being replaced, it's not being retired, and it's not heading off into the sunset alongside some of the other forgotten legacy content. Instead, the new Formula Vee will coexist alongside the original car. And honestly, I think that's the right decision, because the Formula Vee has become something far bigger than just a rookie car. For many of us, it was our first experience of open wheel racing. I still remember my early days in the V. The first thing you learn is that horsepower solves very few problems, and momentum becomes everything. Every mistake hurts, every poor corner exit costs you all the way down to the next straight. Every missed apex has consequences. You quickly discover that driving smoothly is faster than driving aggressively. That's a lesson many drivers spend years trying to learn, and the V teaches you that in roughly 10 laps. What fascinates me most is how many experienced drivers continue racing it. And think about that for a moment. Some of these drivers own every Formula car on the service, so they could be racing something like the Super Formula or the IndyCar or the FIA F4, yet many still choose the V. So why is that? Because great racing isn't always about speed. Sometimes it's about competition. Sometimes it's about racecraft or close battles. The Formula V consistently delivered all three. So which V will people choose? And that's a fascinating question. Will experienced drivers stick with the original? Will rookies migrate towards the newer car? Or will the communities actually split? Or will they complement one another? Personally, I suspect the original V will maintain a fierce, loyal following because it's quirky, it's challenging, and it's unique. And unique cars tend to develop passionate communities. Just look at the Spec Racer Ford, or the Lotus 49, or the Advanced Mazda. These cars survive because they offer something different. The Formula V sits firmly in that category. The new V, however, may become a fantastic bridge between rookie racing and the FF1600, which leads nicely to another question. Does the Formula ladder need more steps? Current progression often looks something like this. Formula V, FF1600, FIA F4, Super Formula Lights, and then Super Formula. For some drivers, that's a significant jump between categories. The new V potentially adds another stage of development, another opportunity to learn, another opportunity to refine racecraft before progressing further. And let's be honest, many drivers rush through licenses far too quickly. They see promotion as success. Sometimes staying put and developing skills is actually the smarter move. The new Formula V may encourage exactly that. Now we're going to move on to the BMW M2 Racing that has also been announced. Another major announcement this week, hearing about the BMW M2 Racing. And I have to say, I think this could become one of the smartest additions iRacing has made in years. So why is that? Because it fills a gap. Let's look at the current sports car pathway. Mazda MX-5, onto Toyota GR86, onto GT4 and then onto GT3. That's broadly how many drivers progress. The problem is that the jump between some of those categories can feel quite significant. The BMW M2 potentially creates another stepping stone, something approachable and something forgiving, something that teaches good habits, and perhaps most importantly, something free. Never underestimate the value of free content. Every time iRacing releases free content, it lowers the barrier to entry. It allows new members to experience more of the service. It increases participation, and participation is the lifeblood of iRacing. The M2 also raises an interesting question. Do we sometimes underestimate slower cars? Let's be honest, most of us love the fast cars. We love GT3s, we love prototypes, and we love Super Formula. We love anything that produces impressive lap times. But slower cars often produce the best racing, and the MX-5 has clearly proven that for many years. The Formula Vee that we've just spoken about has proved that, and the FF1600 continues to prove that. So could the BMW M2 join that list? Possibly. But if it does, don't be surprised if it develops a dedicated following very quickly. Let's zoom out for a moment, because individual features only tell part of the story. The bigger question is, what does this update tell us about iRacing's priorities? When I look at the announcement, as I spoke about earlier, I see a common theme: learning, accessibility, progression, retention. And Dirt AI helps new drivers enter a discipline. The Formula Vee expansion helps develop Formula drivers. The BMW M2 Racing strengthens the sports car ladder, and the UI improvements continue reducing friction. Everything seems focused on helping drivers remain engaged. That's important because retaining members is just as important as attracting new ones. We've all seen friends join iRacing, and some stay, and unfortunately some leave. The difference often comes down to whether they find a pathway that suits them. The easier their pathway becomes, the healthier the service becomes. Now let's indulge in a little speculation. Where is all this heading? What does iRacing look like, let's say, in 5 years from now? Because if you'd shown today's iRacing to somebody in 2015, they would barely recognise it. We have rain, we have adaptive AI, we have improved physics, massive content libraries, global special events. Everything has evolved. So what's happening next? Personally, I think we'll continue to see improvements in the following areas. The first is onboarding, making the service easier to learn. The second is immersion, graphics, audio, weather, environment. And the third is intelligence, with smarter AIs, smarter systems, better analysis, perhaps even AI-assisted race control one day. The exact details don't really matter. What matters is that iRacing clearly isn't standing still, and that's reassuring. Because regardless of our favourite cars, favourite tracks or favourite series, we all want the same thing. We want the service to keep improving. Okay, we're at the midpoint in today's podcast, and we're going to hear from the sponsor, Outlap. We'll be right back. We're having a quick pause here to mention our sponsor, Outlap, who are supporting the podcast. Outlap is built around the side of sim racing we don't talk about enough. The focus, the preparation, and mental work that happens long before the race actually starts. It's not about hype or loud designs. It's about process, patience, and showing up ready, whether that's in the rig or stepping away from it. If that side of sim racing resonates with you, you'll find Outlap quietly ticking along in the background. I want to thank Outlap again for sponsoring the podcast, and the link to their sim racing apparel store is in the show notes. I just want to thank Outlap for sponsoring the podcast again. And if anybody's interested in their sim racing apparel, their store's link is in the show notes below. We're going to start this topic with a question. What actually makes a great racetrack? Is it history? Is it challenge? Is it the track scenery? Or is it the racing quality? What about the danger aspect or nostalgia? Take the Nürburgring for example. Would it be considered legendary if it opened today? Or is part of its reputation built upon decades of history? What about Bathurst? Would we love it as much if it was completely flat? Probably not. Take Spa for example. Would Spa be Spa without Eau Rouge or Radion? Again, probably not. The truth is that great racetracks are really defined by a single corner or a single feature. They're defined by how they make us feel. The anticipation, the challenge, the respect, and the satisfaction when you finally nail a lap. That's what separates good tracks from great tracks. And with that in mind, we're going to start a world tour continent by continent and look at the tracks that are there. Now, in the show notes, there will be a link to my Facebook page with a poll for you, viewers and listeners, to participate in, to drive some more data so we can feedback maybe on next week's episode. Now, we're going to start with Europe, the heavyweight champion. This is the continent that many listeners will probably place at the top of their list. Its racing circuits have a Hall of Fame, and if so, Europe would own most of it. Spa-Francorchamps, Nürburgring-Nordschleife, Silverstone, Brands Hatch, Donington Park, Oulton Park, Monza, Imola, Red Bull Ring, Zandvoort. The list goes on and on. What's fascinating about European circuits is that many weren't originally designed as purpose-built racing facilities. Many evolved from public roads. Many were shaped by geography rather than architects. Many simply follow the landscape, and perhaps that's why they feel so natural. Take Oulton Park, a circuit many listeners know I absolutely love. It's constantly moving, the track rises, the track falls, corners appear from nowhere, and the circuit feels alive. You aren't simply driving around a piece of tarmac, you're dancing with the terrain. The same applies to Brands Hatch, Spa, and Nordschleife. These tracks don't actually feel manufactured, they feel discovered, and that creates their character. The Nordschleife, well, let's spend a few minutes talking about what many people consider the greatest circuit on earth. The Nürburgring Nordschleife. Over 20 kilometres of tarmac, hundreds of corners, constant elevation changes. There's no room for mistakes, no opportunity to relax, and every lap feels like an event. Every lap feels like an achievement, and perhaps that's why so many iRacers love it. The Nordschleife isn't simply a racetrack, it's a challenge, it's a test, it's something you conquer rather than merely drive. I often wonder whether any modern circuit will ever achieve that status. Would a circuit built today be allowed to actually become a Nordschleife? Probably not, which makes it even more special. What about Spa? Arguably the most universally loved circuit in modern motorsport. But here's a question. How much of Spa's reputation comes from Eau Rouge and Radion alone? Take those away and it's still considered the greatest. Would it still be considered the greatest track in the world? Personally, I think yes, because Spa offers everything. Fast corners, slow corners, elevation changes, overtaking opportunities, strategy and weather. Every lap feels slightly different. Every race develops differently. And when the rain arrives, the challenge increases dramatically. For me, Spa deserves every bit of its reputation. Now, what about North America? If Europe is the historian, North America is the racer. Many American circuits aren't necessarily famous because they're beautiful. They're famous because they produce fantastic racing. Watkins Glen, Road America, Sebring, Daytona, Indianapolis, VIR, and Road Atlanta. These circuits consistently deliver close competition, and that's incredibly important. Because while a track may be enjoyable to drive, what really matters in iRacing is whether it creates good racing. Road America is one of my favourite examples. On paper, it shouldn't work as well as it does. The layout appears relatively simple. The corners aren't especially complex, yet racers there are often always entertaining. But why is that? Because the circuit encourages opportunities. Opportunities to attack, opportunities to defend, and guess what? Opportunities to make mistakes. The best tracks create opportunities, and Road America does exactly that. Sebring, a circuit that feels like it's actively trying to break your suspension. Every bump, every braking zone, every corner. The place feels brutal. And now many of us have finished a long stint at Sebring and our hands feel like they've been vibrated off something that somebody breaking tarmac would use. Yet somehow the brutality creates fantastic racing. You never feel comfortable at Sebring, you never feel fully in control, and perhaps that's why it remains such a favourite. Now moving on to the Oceania as the little dark horse, particularly Australia, because I genuinely believe this region punches far above its weight. Mount Panorama, Phillip Island, Sandown, Winton, The Bend, all these tracks are exceptional, yet they really receive the same recognition as European circuits. Let's talk about one of the most famous, Bathurst. If Bathurst existed in Europe, would it be considered one of the greatest tracks ever built? I think the answer would be yes. Massive elevation change, tiny margins for error, huge commitment required, and a mountain section that punishes every mistake. First time you drive Bathurst, you're intimidated. The 100th time you drive Bathurst, guess what? You're still intimidated. And that's its greatness. A great track never becomes easy. Phillip Island is another masterpiece. Flow, momentum, commitment, and confidence. Every fast corner asks a question. Do you trust the car? Do you actually trust yourself? And do you just trust your judgment? The fastest laps come from confidence, and confidence is something every iRacer spends years developing. Moving on to Asia, South America, and Africa. These continents may have fewer circuits on iRacing, but they still contribute icons. Asia gives us Suzuka, a circuit that combines technical precision with incredible flow. The S's alone have taught generations of drivers about rhythm. South America gives us Interlagos, compact, aggressive and unpredictable. A circuit that almost every a circuit that almost always delivers action. Africa gives us Kyalami, that's currently not on the iRacing series, but is one of the most underrated tracks in the world. It's fast, technical, demanding, and visually stunning. So, which continent wins? Honestly, I don't think there is a correct answer. Europe probably wins on numbers, South America probably wins on raceability, and Oceania probably wins on character. Asia wins on precision, South America wins on passion, and Africa wins on potential. And perhaps that may be the real answer. Every continent contributes something unique, which is why I'd love to hear your thoughts through the survey that I mentioned earlier on the Facebook page. If you could only race on one continent's tracks for the next 12 months, which would you choose? So I'd appreciate it if some of you would find your way to the Facebook page and carry out the survey. We'll be right back for this week's Agony Uncle section. Okay, it's now time for this week's Agony Uncle. This week's question comes from a listener who wrote into the show. Guy, every season iRacing seems to release new content, new cars, new tracks, new series. I find myself constantly wondering whether I should buy things because everyone else is buying them. How do I know what content is actually worth purchasing? Firstly, another fantastic question. Secondly, you're definitely not alone with that kind of query. Almost every iRacer experienced this at some point. And it's the content trap. Let's start with the biggest mistake. Buying content because other people are excited about it. And believe me, we've all done that. A new car launches, YouTube explodes, Discords explode, and social media explodes. Everyone is saying it's amazing. So should you buy it? Yes, you've gone and bought it. 3 weeks later, it's sitting in your garage, barely touched. The excitement disappeared. The novelty disappeared. And now you're wondering why you spent that money. That's not a criticism, it's human nature. We're all susceptible to hype. Instead of buying content randomly, build a plan and ask yourself, what type of racing do you enjoy? For example, is it sports cars, is it formula cars, ovals or dirt? Then build a ladder. For sports cars, perhaps that ladder looks like MX-5, GR86, BMW M2 Racing, GT4 and then GT3. For formula drivers, perhaps your build is Formula Vee, New V, FF1600, F4, Super Formula Light and Super Formula. Once you know your destination, buying decisions become much easier. Here's another question. Would you rather drive 30 cars badly or 3 cars exceptionally well? Most people immediately choose variety, but the reality is that mastery often delivers more enjoyment. The drivers who improve fastest are rarely the ones jumping between 15 cars every week. They're the drivers who spend time learning one car properly, understand its strengths, its weaknesses, understanding how it behaves when things go wrong, and that knowledge creates consistency. Consistency creates results. And results create confidence, and confidence is incredibly powerful. Now, looking back at my own iRacing journey, there are definitely purchases I would make immediately. The Nürburgring, Bathurst, Spa, Alton Park, Road America. These tracks have provided me, anyway, years of enjoyment. They continue appearing on schedules, they continue producing fantastic racing, they continue offering value. There are other purchases though that I've barely touched, and most iRacers have a few of these hiding in their account. The key lesson is simple. Buy for the driver you are, not for the driver you hope to become next week. I've definitely bought things as well that I've never raced. So yeah, my advice is just buy what excites you, what you're going to stick to, and stick with it. Okay, final thoughts for today's podcast, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to return to three big questions. Which development update feature excites you most? Will the new Formula Vee become a success alongside its original? And which content has the greatest racetracks on Earth? Let me know through the Facebook survey. Give me some feedback for people watching on YouTube. And we're starting to look at TikTok as well. As always, thank you for listening. Thank you for supporting me and the podcast that clearly you enjoy listening or watching. Don't forget to share it with your fellow iRacers wherever you are in the world. Thank you for being part of this, mine and your growing community. Until next time, stay safe, stay consistent, and remember, sometimes the smartest move isn't the fastest one. I'll see you on the track soon, and don't forget to say hello, happy iRacing, and I'll see you next week, folks.
Whatever it takes, we're racing, we're in the zone. Whatever it takes, we push hard, never alone. I'm in the cockpit, the engines roar, hear me now. We're racing circles, got a hustle made a vow. Chasing victory, it's all or nothing on the track. Speed is my motto, nothing's ever holding back. Whatever it takes, we're racing.